Hello, everyone, and welcome to Cut and Splice. This is Matt speaking, and as usual, I'm here with Gil and Jason. This time around, we are talking about Elam Kilmov's 1985 film Come and See, which follows a young boy named Floria through the horrors of World War II, a young Belarusian boy who decides to join the resistance against the Nazis, and his journey and his experiences as they unfold. That's probably not dramatic enough of an intro, but I guess that's kind of a tipping off point. So, this is one of my favorite movies of all time. I'm just going to let the cat out of the bag right now. I regard this film very highly, and I guess we're going to see if other people agree with me. Yeah.
I guess
um,
Jason has the most recent. He just finished watching it. What state of mind are you in, Jason, right now?
A little overwhelmed, I think. Woof. You know, all those I mean this in a good and bad way, but there's this movie is just like packed full of very non-American, non-Hollywood kind of things, not necessarily tropes, but stuff. And it's just like it's a lot to take in, It's like there's a lot of like stuff that's there just for that's I just think it would have been in all the good and bad ways would have been done very differently probably in a Hollywood movie.
mm,
Yeah. So one thing I was thinking as I was watching it and having immediate reactions to it is in the context of the podcast. It made me think of Gallipoli, of course, because
Me too.
mm,
it's similar in a way, and it does kind of show you, even though Gallipoli wasn't Hollywood, but it shows you a Western movie, a Western approach to, a kid trying to get into a war situation. And it's funny, I think we did the same thing with, in a way, with Tenet and then Inception too. So we do these pairings, not
Yeah.
together, but just apart, of these movies that have some similarities, and maybe succeed in certain places where the other ones fail, and vice versa. So I had that type of reaction to it. But yes, it is quite horrific. It definitely takes it to, but not in a bad way. It doesn't
Yeah.
feel
gratuitous.
self-indulgent.
They're
Yeah,
both very anti-war movies.
exactly. There was an interview that I watched. Funny, I watched it before I watched this movie many months ago when Matt first mentioned it again and again online. And there was like a Roger Deakins interview, and he was talking about why it's one of his favorite movies. And he was saying how, in a way, it's in the movie sort of shows how it could be worse. And I guess we can get into that with the analysis and spoilers and the second part, but it actually shows how much it holds back in a way. But even though it holds back, it's quite horrific, yeah, compared to other similar movies. One thing, I had moments throughout that I felt it was pushing the boundaries of realism a bit much. Like I didn't buy certain specific scenes, but then towards the end of the movie, you sort of go along with it because it almost comes off as if it's one huge nightmare. I think that's what it's
Yeah,
intended to be. So you forgive those hiccups that just don't feel very authentic in the moment.
yeah.
Uh,
I was actually thinking about this, and that I, I I think that the movie is kind of a contradiction in terms and in existence, in that it's kind of a hyper realistic fairy tale. I know that that is that that's an oxymoron, but I think that there's just I mean most of what is actually depicted in the movie, I mean especially toward the end and avoiding spoilers, really did happen in Belarus during 1943, while the Germans were basically in occupation of that territory. I mean, all that stuff actually happened, but I think that the film is so devoted to Floria's subjective experience of those visuals and what's going on in the world around him that there are just certain moments that kind of go into hyper reality or surreality or something like that. Some kind of something that isn't just reality because you're looking at it through his eyes.
I'd be curious to hear which the scenes were, because I remember having a weird reaction to something in the first third of the movie, and now, like I said, I just got done watching the end of the movie, so I can't even remember what it was now.
Yeah, and I think we can get to that second part very quickly after finishing the recommending, because I do feel like there's so much to unpack here. Well, one thing I was gonna say is that I don't know how this happened, but in the span of the last 2 weeks, I basically saw 127 hours. The other day, I just watched The Piano, and then I watched this movie. So it's like 3 depressing movies. I mean, 127 hours in a way is life affirming to some degree, but it's pretty 3 brutal movies. And actually, The Piano is an interesting movie to watch close to this one, because that movie, more so than Come and See, is very unrealistic. It almost feels like it's a nightmarish sort of representation of what reality is, but the story is so convoluted that it's tough to buy it. But it's all symbolism, and so I think some of that is happening in Come and See, but it's mixed in more so with the realism. It's more grounded than The Piano. The Piano is just it's like a like a nightmarish vision or something. But so those movies exist is the point that I'm trying to make. That they're really, there's something really off about them. They don't you don't really, they're too convoluted, but it works because that's the intent, and there's a consistency that the convolution, and that's why you buy it, as opposed to a movie that's real, very convoluted all of a sudden.
Yeah. It sounds like you need to watch Tommy Boy or something next to just kind of balance everything out.
No, yeah, well, that's what I was gonna say. I am so ready for a Dumb and Dumber episode. A comedy would be definitely nice to do next. Yeah. So, but I gotta say,
I think
by
we
the
should
end
do
of
Schindler's List.
yeah, for sure, definitely.
Yeah.
But as far as my recommending and reacting to it, I really was, oh, it's too bad. Me and Matt are sort of gonna agree, because I do agree that it's a masterpiece. I mean, at the end of it, I even though I have a problem with the ending, like the last shot, and we'll get to that.
Yeah.
But in spite of all those little hiccups, it is, and I like to repeat this movie, it is sort of like The Dark Knight. The Dark Knight is, like the movie that never fails to succeed, because even though there's flaws, it's the rest of it is so overwhelmingly masterful that you can't deny it. So if I had to rate this movie, my initial impression to it would be like a 9. And it's probably not a 10 just because of those little things. And it's fine. It's okay for a movie not to click with the person completely. So, but I think it's definitely an 8 to 9 for me, because it's really something else. I think Roger Deakins said it should be compulsory viewing because every human in the world should see this movie because it's the closest thing to representing not a warfare, but just being in a war. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's definitely brutal and important to see. Yeah, that's. But as far as recommending it, it's tough to recommend it because you really need to have the stomach for it. It's really something that you need to get in the mood for or be willing to put yourself through because it's not easy viewing, but at the same time, it's also not boring. It moves at a good pace. There's some influences there from Tarkovsky, but overall the pacing is better than a Tarkovsky movie.
Yeah.
So it's definitely more normal, if you can even say that, in that sense. And there's a lot to appreciate with what the camera work and everything that's being done there. But it's still a lot to stomach as you're watching it.
Jason?
Similar to what Gil said, I would heavily recommend it if if the person I'm speaking to knows what they're getting into. You know, I mean, it's not a very accessible movie, at least on the grand scale of what is and is not accessible. It's not an easygoing movie. It's not a fun movie, but it's very interesting and it's very compelling and moving and depressing, but in the way it should be. Powerful. I mean, like I feel like it's really odd for me to even try to give it any kind of like rating, considering I just got done watching it and I haven't really digested it well yet. But I don't know, like maybe like a solid 8 for sure, maybe more.
All right. So, I mean, one area where I'm obviously going to have to agree is in terms of recommendation. First of all, it's a freaking Russian movie. You know,
Yeah.
like, so immediately, that's you have to understand the palate of the person that you're recommending it to. I mean, you almost have to be a little bit of a weird person to be super into Russian movies as an American. I obviously I'm a weird person because I'm super into Russian movies. But in terms of, but I mean, bottom line, as far as I can tell, this is an absolute masterpiece of a film, and yeah, this is going to be the first time that I give a 10 to a movie on this on the show. As far as I'm concerned, it's a 10. I mean, it is a gut punch in all the best ways. I guess like this can be a segue into the second half of it, but I think it was Tarkovsky, not Tarkovsky, sorry, Truffaut, right, who was always talking about how it's almost impossible to make an anti-war movie because cinema kind of necessarily glorifies everything that it touches, or is by its nature exciting, and and it's pretty much always looked upon by the survivors. And I think that Roger Ebert said in his review that this is a movie that actually achieves making a war movie where the survivors must envy the dead. And that's another thing that I think is relevant, which is we do have kind of a distinction between making war movies and making anti-war movies. And to me, this is the perfect example of a movie that's both at the same time. But yeah,
Is it though?
what both a war movie and an anti-war movie?
I would think that
kinda,
this would be a perfect example of an anti-war movie. I don't know if I would really.
I would agree. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, wouldn't a perfect
Okay.
example, regardless of quality, let's just like table that aspect of it for a minute. wouldn't a perfect example of a war movie / anti-war movie, like that's almost exactly 50-50, be like Platoon?
That's true, because there's actual war going on where
Yeah, there's
this
like
is
there's
mostly.
little to no combat at all in this movie.
Actually, that's a good point. I'm glad that we're bringing this up now because we can bring up spoilers that, Floria doesn't fire a single shot at anybody during the movie. He only finally discharges the weapon at a picture of Hitler at the end.
Yeah. I was
Yeah.
screaming at the beginning when there's like a helpless paratrooper that's clearly there to butcher his people stuck in a tree, and him and what's the girl's name? Gosha or something like that, or
Glacia?
Glasha?
Yeah, Glacia.
Glasha. Yeah, like they just Glasha. They just like grab the gun and just like run away, and I was like, at least take one shot. Take that guy out,
Yeah, no, he's definitely not the. It's definitely the, but still there is the similarities to Gallipoli. Yeah, so I guess we're getting into spoilers. Yeah, no, it is an interesting. I was gonna say because a lot of what's going on there, the usage of Steadicam, it does. It's got an element of beauty to it, but it's rough. It's rougher. It's definitely not 1917. It's rough around the edges. It's mostly just. It's funny because Spielberg did the opposite with Saving Private Ryan with the opening there, because he went with cutting and staccato style to represent just the horrors of combat. But here's the complete opposite, is by cutting very little and having a lot of these extensive following the characters Steadicam shots. You feel more in the moment, like you can't escape it, like whatever is happening. In a similar way, the way they did in Children of Men, just with more handheld, more immediacy, you feel like you're there, you're stuck there, you can't escape. Like there's no cut that's gonna save you. You're with them in the shit, sort of.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's
a good
got
way of describing it.
Yeah, it's very effective, for sure. Yeah, and Jason, you were asking about the moments that I I thought were.
Yeah, what was the one you felt was or several moments or whatever? I want to see if you can jog my memory, because I remember thinking about something and going, "Ooh, I got to bring that up because that just seems weird," and then like I completely forgot about it.
Yeah, I mean, there's the scene in the when they go back to the Luke Skywalker scene, when he comes back to his hometown and to find his family.
Oh yeah,
and he thinks that maybe they went to hide in this hiding place, like this island or something. And then they run.
That was it. That was exactly what thank you. Okay, keep going.
Yeah, so
Yep.
he runs with that Steadicam running after them, and she runs after him, and she looks back for a moment. She sees that all the townspeople have been butchered and placed behind the house that they didn't see initially, and she runs to catch up with him and to tell him that they're dead. Like his family's probably piled up there, but he's like in a trance. He's like doesn't know what to do with himself, but he wants to go to that hiding place to see if they're there. And that's all good. That's very effective. It's a powerful shot and everything's good. But then he slushes through the mud and for like 5 minutes to get to this island, which I don't know why he can't run across, or why can't he see that they're not there. I don't know why he has to go through the mud, and I don't know why she can't call him out to tell him to stop. Like, why does she have to go through the sludge with him for 5 minutes just to finally?
It's so long.
It's so long, and then they get out of. And why is that? It's a plot point. It's a device just so they can come out of the mud, and they can have that scene with both of their like muddy faces, of him denying that they're dead and her saying that they're dead, and then the other guy comes, the other soldier comes, and helps them, and it just it feels false. It hits the wrong note. But then as the movie progresses, and there's a few of these moments that are just a bit over the top, and there are a few even before too, then you sort of like, yeah, I kind of get it. I kind of get it. It just the movie takes these liberties and just creating these surreal moments that are not very believable to imprint them on your mind, like the faces of them, the two of them screaming at each other with mud all over them. How do you make that happen realistically?
Yeah.
Like maybe they just couldn't find a way to make that happen realistically. So
I completely agree with that scene and your issue with it. I had the same issue in that I think that the trudging through the bog, which I don't know where they found mud like that, but it made me uncomfortable to watch it. I was like, good God, it's like a thick layer on top of the liquidy mud underneath, and like she looks like she's drowning, even though she's not losing her mind, and he is clearly losing his mind. And she just decided to jump in with him because, I mean, granted, at this moment in the story, they're emotionally very connected to each other, so she wants to kind of be there for him, but she just I don't know if she's physically about to drown and that's why she's grabbing onto him the way she is, or if she's just I couldn't tell what her motivation was other than to try and get to the island with him. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. I was like, because I mean, see, okay, here's a perfect example of what I was trying to say earlier and kind of failing to say. In an American movie, if their goal was let's get to that shot where they're on the island, his psyche is literally splitting and they're covered in mud, and she just went through this horrific thing with him and just yells at him like, they're dead, your family's dead, and he's like, no, they're not. Ah! Like, if they wanted to get to that shot in an American movie, they would have done the same thing, and they would have used the same plot device of them having to go through the mud, and it would have been like this crazy thing where they had to jump into the mud and like pull themselves out, and it would have been like 4 seconds. It wouldn't have been like 4 minutes of trudging through mud in an unbroken shot. And then the whole time, she's not even trying to tell him that they're dead. She's just going, ah, ah, ah. And I'm just like, I don't get it. I don't know what's going on. But like you said, they get to the moment where they're yelling at each other, and it's that like these two people are so intimately connected at this moment, and they're just verbally tearing into each other, and it's worth it for that moment. But then he grabs her and throws her in a different direction off the island into some very clean water that's about 3 feet deep. And I'm like, shenanigans! You were 15 to 20 feet away from that clean ass water. That is where you cross. You do not go in the mud. I don't care how crazy your brain is. No, shenanigans.
You know what it reminds me of? Last Action Hero.
Yes, they get out of the water, and I was like, "Oh, they're all clean now."
No, but obviously there's a lot of, I think, like symbolism and metaphors going on there, like the trudging through the bog, and then the juxtaposition of them being muddy faced, looking at each other with those centered close-ups that are looking at the lens or like just below, just above. And they're juxtaposing that with earlier the beauty shots of them being still slightly innocent and in the forest and having that flirtatious moment.
There's no question there was a lot of good. There was a lot of thought, I should say.
Yeah, exactly. But I'm just like, you know what? Just to calibrate that a little bit. But you know, making movies is tough. Like, you don't always make the right calls. And maybe we're wrong, and maybe there's a different explanation. I don't know, Matt. What was your reaction?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think that there might be a little bit of underplaying of how hard it can be to tell somebody that you care about that his family's dead.
True.
And you're
Yeah.
not just going to blurt that out, and
But do you
maybe
risk
you
your
do.
life?
Well, I mean, I think that if a lot of stuff is going on, simultaneously, and you figure, okay, well, maybe there's some hope. Maybe, like, I don't know what his family looks like. I just saw a bunch of dead bodies. I mean,
Right.
yeah, it's likely that his family's there, but hey, maybe they are on the other side of this damn bog. Am I gonna
Also,
shout?
a point of view shot
Maybe,
would have been nice to see what they're looking at. Is there a tree that he can't
Yeah.
see through? Why is he drudging through it? Like, but again, that was the whole style of it, is that we're stuck with him. We can't see where he's going until he gets there. Like I didn't even see the island. I just saw him going through mud and getting to more mud. It looks like the type of thing that you could technically walk around, or at least see at a distance if they're there or not.
I have to chime in. I agree that there's an issue with that scene that is kind of exacerbated by our lack of knowledge of the geography of that moment. Like if when she's chasing after him, if we got a shot of the island and we see that it's bigger than what we saw, and so there is a good chance that maybe there is someone hiding on it somewhere, then maybe that would explain why she's like, well, let me go along with him to get there. And then it's only after getting dragged through that crap that, like, she just stops and is like, no, I gotta stop this guy. He's going crazy, kind of thing. But like during that long 5-minute trudging through the mud, it's like, good God, like, who signed up for this? Like, she just jumped in to, like, grab a hold of his shirt and be dragged through this thing. I mean, I almost got these, like, visions of Sigourney Weaver in Galaxy Quest when she, like, turns the corner and sees all the crushy things, and she's just like, fuck that.
Anywho, yeah, but but I still accept what Matt is saying. It's
Yes.
understandable that maybe he couldn't hear her. Like, people are just, they tune out stuff when they're like in a one-track mind.
She does say that, doesn't she?
Yeah.
When the guy shows up looking for an explanation, does she yell that he's half deaf or something?
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, actually, that's kind of an interesting sound design fact. After the bombing scene that happened earlier, Floria's it is actually set up that Floria loses a lot of his ability to hear, and they actually changed the way that they recorded the sound for the rest of the movie.
That's
from there
interesting.
on out, to kind of dampen it. It wasn't as full, from that point out. So I mean, you're also supposed to be kind of hearing through Floria's ears from that point out. So yeah. Also, not to digress, but this might. This is not intended to be political, but it's just one of those things that, with the whole Alec Baldwin thing happening, they actually use live ammunition on Come and See.
Yeah.
Yeah, I heard on the thing with the cow scene, like, it's actually real, like, bullets flying through the air.
Yeah, they actually killed the cow.
Yeah, that's that too. Like,
oh, did they really?
Yeah.
That's
Jesus.
happens when you make a movie over there.
Yeah, that was real.
So apparently, Coppola needed to apparently make a movie over in that country, and they wouldn't have had all those troubles.
Well, he also made it in, didn't he make it like in Vietnam or somewhere? Like,
apparently they still had
or
problems.
Philippines. I think it might have been the Philippines, but yeah.
Wherever he made it, they still got mad at him.
Well, yeah. Well, he's still working with American unions and all that stuff. So. Well, I mean, the Soviets actually have a long track record with that. Like, with Andrei Rublev, they actually killed a horse on set.
Jeez.
For one scene, but yeah.
Yeah, no, it's intense.
Yeah.
Another thing I was gonna say, another thing this movie reminded me is it's the complete opposite. Not the complete opposite, but pretty close to the opposite of It's a Beautiful Life. It's like
Yeah.
what would happen if a kid didn't have a father that can lie to him and make the whole war or Holocaust a game? You get this shit. You get
Interesting.
like like ninth circles of hell basically that this kid goes through.
Yeah.
And he's not even in the war. That's the crazy thing. He's not even in the war. This is like peripheral shit. And like the war itself. Uh, and I guess we can get into that. It's like similar to Waltz with Bashir. They have the thing with the images
Yeah,
in
I
the
thought
end.
about Waltz with
Yeah.
Bashir at
Yeah,
the
because
end.
the I wonder if the guy got it from that. But that idea, because it definitely there was animation, so it was very effective. Here it was also pretty effective because it just takes you to a whole
It's
other
so
level.
different from anything we've seen
Yeah.
so far.
Exactly, and I think that's what Roger Deakins was talking about. Like those images show you very briefly how much worse it could have been if you really portrayed what war is like.
Yeah. And not to digress, I mean, we can go into all that, but one of something that I find to be incredibly interesting is that, I mean, yeah, it was still the Soviet Union. I mean, the Soviet Union under Gorbachev was different than under Stalin and Khrushchev, but obviously, the Soviet Union had pretty much banned religion, at least religions that weren't just worshiping the state. But I mean, the actual title is a reference to the Book of Revelation.
Oh,
Uh, you know, uh,
I was wondering about that.
I think I think I have this memorized. And when he had opened the fourth seal, I heard the voice of the fourth beast say, "Come and see." And I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and his name that sat on him was Death, and hell followed with him.
I see.
and then the
Yeah,
lightning strikes, and then Kurt Russell says something awesome.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, yeah. The title of the movie is a direct reference to the Bible.
Oh, I see. Because
Interesting.
I did wonder if it was come and see in the sense of like maybe in Russian it sounds better, but it's some sort of kind of like duck you sucker, like a not so good translation of like
Yeah,
keep your head down type of thing, like come and see, like you need to see this, like psst, psst, like you got to see this type of thing. Like here, I'm going to show you something about what war can
Yeah.
be like. I was thinking more in those lines, but obviously it could go both ways. Maybe it was intended to be both, like to be the biblical and the, you know, like much
yeah,
like duck you suck. um,
yeah.
I guess I'll go on my second thing and tell me what you think. So the
Right.
last shot. So
It's one
Jason can
of
respond.
several questions I have is about the last shot.
Yeah,
Right.
I gotta say, this movie, and this relates somehow to this movie could potentially have one of the greatest endings of all time.
Mm.
It's what they set up here, and he does this. Barry Jenkins does this in the Underground Railroad, and also Beale Street. Even Moonlight, I think, he does it. It's got this thing about shooting people dead on, and looking at the camera, and especially in
Mhm.
Underground Railroad, there's this sense of it that it's bearing witness type of thing, that you're looking into
Mhm.
the souls of the characters, and you're sort of
Yeah,
transported, or at least connecting with historically, especially if it's a historical movie. And I think this movie does that as well, maybe to that effect. Barry Jenkins said like it was because of another filmmaker that he liked, and I'm not sure if it was which one it was. I should look up the name, but so I can check out those movies. But in any case, it's a very interesting thing. And then at the end of Come and See, he does the shot of following the soldiers when he's
yeah,
catching up, and then the camera veers off. Most of the movie, the camera does the whole Hitchcock thing of being motivated by action. But then at the end, it veers off into the woods,
Yeah.
and it's got that like ominous choir like music,
Yep.
and it's very ghost like. It's very like Shining type of thing, and and you're hearing all these voices echoing in the forest, in this dark forest, and I'm like, oh my god, this is amazing, this is gorgeous. Like he's basically talking like all these echoes of the past, this human choir of all these dead people or people that suffered through this carnage, and they're all singing to us in this dark forest of what humanity can do, and it's beautiful. And it's not that. They're just like gonna reconnect with the
Yes.
soldiers. And I'm like,
Yes.
what the fuck, dude? What did you do? Like you had the perfect ending. It reminded me of what you call it. It reminded me of the Spielberg Kubrick film, um the Pinocchio thing, like
AI.
the AI. Yeah, like AI where like he dips into the water, you
Mhm.
know, he sinks there, he's gonna essentially die, but he's a real boy. No, we're gonna spend 30 more minutes going into like he's gonna meet aliens and it's gonna be in the future. It's gonna have all the, it's like, no, you had the perfect ending, you just cut the movie 30 minutes short. So it's a similar thing here where all they needed to cut is like
Or
the reconnecting with the
you know,
soldiers. Yeah.
the Herzog documentary with the penguin walking away into the snow.
Yeah, that one too. That was the perfect ending, but that was a bit
Yep.
too short.
And then there
But
was like
yeah,
30 more minutes after that.
yeah, I know the penguin walking away was like
That was epic.
that's the whole, that was epic. Like that you end on that, but it's but like we said, that's why to me it's a 9. But but I totally
Yeah.
understand that somebody could come from a different perspective and explain to me why coming back to the soldier is like it's just nifty getting back to the soldiers, but cutting on Black Forest with choirs of the echoes of the souls of humans that died in the war, that's poetry. Getting back to the soldiers is nifty. It's
I
1917.
I got it. I got to
Yeah.
ask. I got to say, like, I completely agree because I was watching this movie, and you know, to its credit, I got to say that throughout this film, there's all these moments where I'm not quite sure what I'm seeing, and then I'm like kind of like what you said about the you know, the juxtaposing those two things and with their faces looking at right in the camera and all this stuff. Like there's no question that there was so much thought put into this movie. Very little, if anything, in this movie was probably not done with so much planning and so much intent behind it. And a lot of times when I feel like I'm not getting something, it's only because you have to wait till the next couple scenes or something when it all clicks. And I'm like, wow, oh wow, that was cool. You know, that's my experience watching this movie. And it got to that end, and I'm like watching him, and I thought it should have ended with him shooting the picture. And I actually kind of thought it was gonna end before that even. And then it ended, then the picture thing happened, and I was like, ooh. And then the newsreel footage and the backwards footage happened, and I was like, ooh, oh, that's a good way to end it. But then he catches up to them, and I'm like, okay, well, that kind of says something. So okay, it's fine. And then it veers, and it's some great camera work, just like a lot of the movie is. And I was like, oh, oh. And I don't even think I was reading into it as much as you were, Gil. But then it just keeps going and going, and it connects back up. And my immediate thought as it went to black was, okay, what does that say? So I was like,
Yeah.
I gotta ask Matt and Gil what they thought because that last shot didn't mean anything. I was like, what the hell?
It was just like it was like the type of thing you would see in a student film. Is like, yeah, we did that. It's like,
Yeah, I mean, I can say that, you know, if I'm going to knock half a point off of the movie at any point, you know, that was a poorly structured sentence. Um, yeah, I can see how. Honestly, yeah, I think that if it were me in complete, you know, with perfect knowledge in retrospect, I might have actually just cut to the credits right after Floria is done unloading his rifle on that photo of Hitler, on that painting of Hitler, and just had the last shot be, his face when he's in, the Jonathan Demme shot, basically looking straight, almost straight into the lens after he's done firing his rifle, and just cut to black. I could see that being, like
Powerful.
the holy fuck. Yeah, that's it. Done. Just cut it. So yeah, I mean, I can see that as being a flaw. I can't really tell you precisely what Kilmov was trying to do by holding that shot as long as he did, and having Floria catch up with the troops. So, I mean, having Floria catch up with the troops is basically telling you, I guess, well, the hell doesn't end. It's
I
just
didn't have
Yeah,
any problem with
this is
that.
just the beginning. I thought that
Right.
was obvious that it was just the beginning, and there's also
Right.
the other young kid that
Yeah.
joined. Like, so it
The-
shows how
Kind of
Floria
mirrors
is
the beginning.
it's
Yeah.
it's at bookends for sure, because
They
now he's no
clearly,
longer the new
like, his
guy.
jacket,
Right.
that case on his back, and the rifle in his hand. I mean, it's clearly supposed to like symbolize him at the beginning and everything.
Yeah, and then he catches up because his war has just begun, which is crazy after everything he's been through.
Yeah.
So that makes
Yeah.
perfect sense. But I dare anybody to explain to me why catching up with the troops was necessary. Maybe see a glimpse. Like, I would cut it exactly when you start seeing them
Through the trees,
through the
right?
trees.
Because
Just
that was
cut
like
it there.
that was a really beautiful way that the camera was working there.
See them again, but then you're like making your way all the way through the trees. It was just unnecessary, but it's
It really
okay.
makes you feel like they were, when the camera gets back to the troops, you're waiting for, it's almost like, wait, why did we go there? And then you're waiting in anticipation for something new, for something like, oh, look what just happened. If there is nothing. It's just like, what?
And if I'm not mistaken, Floria catches up with them before the camera veers off, right? It's
Yeah,
not as
it
if
does.
he connects
Yeah,
only.
yes, he does. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, it really is a strange decision, but in retrospect, hindsight is 2020.
Well, I'm also glad that we're talking about this, because it's occurring to me that maybe I've seen like way too many Russian movies, and I'm so used to seeing camera work like that. And those decisions being made in Russian movies, that it just kind of like flies under my radar.
Let me ask you about a few more scenes then.
Okay.
In no particular order. I just what's coming
All
to my
right.
head. All right. So I guess I'll go in kind of chronological order. I just want to make sure I understand this correctly. So even though they've seen each other and they've been in the camp for a while, oh well, actually, you know what? Let me start even further. This is not a question. This is just a comment. This is just a comment.
Okay.
I could tell right away when he gets to the little resistance group or whatever, and they accept him, and then they start putting him to work, and it cuts to him cleaning stuff, and no scenes whatsoever of them even remotely training him to do anything. And I was like, this is the most disorganized paramilitary group I've ever seen in my life depicted on film. These guys are all going to die. That was just what went through my head.
Well,
And I was right. But anyway, going further. So clearly him and Florian and Glasha, they're in the same camp. They're aware of each other. They've seen each other. She sprinkled some like plants on him for some reason, which I seemed like kind of a dick move because he was cleaning something at the time. But anyway, whatever. And yeah, clearly, even though there's like a handful of women in this group, that they're this resistance group, she is being followed around by like 6 thirsty ass men the entire time. But correct me if I'm wrong. In the following scenes, he doesn't get to go out to fight, which is probably a good thing for him. But considering his age and his temperament and everything going through his mind, that's like a death sentence to him practically. So he is in the woods sobbing about the fact that he has been robbed of his destiny and treated like a child when he wants to be an adult and all those other things. And then he encounters Glasha, who's also sobbing in the woods, and they get that little bonding moment, which is kind of nice and everything, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. She is out there sobbing because in the previous scene, she goes and they had that very, very intense moment where she's making eye contact with the like Russian Jason Statham guy. And and like I don't know, what is she expecting? Does she want him to take her with him? Does she want him to stay back? Like what? I don't get. Clearly they had like a relationship of some kind, but what is it she was hoping for?
I might have to watch it again. I'm.
Is it just I mean that she's young and she's just having these like unrealistic thoughts of like I wish he didn't have to go kind of thing?
Oh,
but I think wasn't there a thing at some point where I don't know if he or she they mention about like the alternative to war is get married, have kids. So I think there's some wishful thinking on her part that it would be nice if we could just settle down, but it's just not the right time to settle down type of thing.
And they definitely both have some kind of abandonment going on in terms of like being left behind. They're there's literally one person left on Earth that you feel that you can actually connect with at this moment. So
if there was anybody in the entire squad that Florian looked up to, it's Russian Jason Statham.
Yeah.
So I guess there's that. Okay, so that's that. My only other one that I really felt was worth mentioning was, did you guys get any sort of deep meaning behind it or anything? Because I was just weirded out by that evil-looking bird. When they're alone in the woods surviving together, there's this bird that shows up that is just like the Antichrist. I don't know, like it is the most terrifying looking bird, and yet it's not even like a really scary breed of bird. It's just the look of it. I don't know how they found this bird, and clearly there's a lot of scenes that focus on it, and the bird like is very kind of I don't know, it's not anthropomorphic, but the way it moves, it seems to be very much like a person. It like walks up to their little hut, looks inside, sees them there, but it doesn't go in. I think that's supposed to mean something. And then it shows up later and it shows up before that in one shot. And I'm like, there's a close-up of the bird's beak, like looking right in the camera, just like the humans do. And I'm like, what the hell is that bird? It's so scary looking.
I don't know, Gil. Did that stick out to you? I can't. I mean, I know what you're talking about. That's just not an aspect of the movie that really jumped out at me.
No, I definitely
so deliberate, and I just don't understand what they were going for.
No, I definitely responded to it. I mean, it's not exactly like a Terrence Malick thing where it's like a random thing he just catches for the sake of catching. It seems like that bird might have been around and they thought, let's shoot some stuff with it. I do wonder if it was a wild bird that just was kind of poking around and they thought might be interesting, but they just did more with it. It does feel like it was almost like the devil, especially if you have some biblical stuff in here.
I thought it was kind of like a devil bird.
It might be a thing where it's that's what I feel like the bearing witness thing comes back to me is the whole idea that whether it's the cow or the bird, it's the bearing witness.
The little furry animal on the German commander's shoulder.
Yes, there's that too, and the dogs play like the more conventional part, but
Of course.
yeah, there's the animal. There's something about the animals. It's kind of bringing the. In that case, it was a pet. The dog, like the Germans have pets, and then the Russians have, wild creatures. Or I guess domesticated with the cow. But there's this. I think wanting to bring in animals into the story to represent something, to represent nature in a way, because nature is already represented with a lot of the forest and stuff, especially
Yeah.
the last shot, and it's definitely a character in the movie. So I think it's trying to bring all of that in, and the ugliness of humanity smack in the middle of all that, because in a way it is a beautiful, impressive bird, but
I
it's
guess.
very dark. Like it's
Yeah.
darkly like lit, like it's very shaded, like the
Mm.
where it was standing and stuff. So it was very moody for sure. It wasn't like beautiful
I
for the
don't
sake of.
want to try to guess exactly what the motivation was, but the creepy little furry thing that's the pet of the commanding officer, the German commanding officer, Sturmbannführer. Anyway, um there's something about that one I where it's like it's something that sits on his shoulder, but then they intentionally show a shot of right before the carnage happens. He takes it, puts it on on like a table or something, and puts a helmet over it so it can't get away. There's something that's kind of like about that, like it's captive or something. I'm not really sure
Yeah.
what, but that was the only thing that kind of came to my mind. I'm sure there was some very much like a lot of thought into why they showed those shots exactly, but
And maybe that's the thing about that bird, is because it was one of the only animals that was free.
yeah,
It was impressively free of all. It was sort of clean of all the messiness of what was going around it, but still in the same, occupying the same world.
yeah,
That's what I think it was. Something about the simplicity of nature, the beauty, and juxtaposing that with the horrors of what's going on. I
yeah.
think there's a lot of juxtaposition of just those contrasting aspects of it. Yeah, the nature plays a big part in it. Nature tends to be beautiful, the forest, the hills,
That is
the
probably one of that sequence from when they're left behind to the bombing to when they're alone in the forest and everything like that to up right up to the point where they are making their way down the street and he's hiding the rifle down his pants and pretending to be limping and such, like right before the horrific realization that his family's dead. That entire sequence is probably the happiest moment in the entire movie.
oh, the raining part where it's raining on them
Yeah,
and they get
all of it.
clean,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Well, I
then
mean,
they
even
cuddle
so,
when it's
even the
cold.
downer stuff in there, like when he's building the shelter and she's freezing to death, you get even when that's sad, they get into the hut and then they're better, you know?
Yeah, at least somebody's caring for somebody else at
Right.
the
And
moment.
there's no
At least
violence
there's,
going on.
yeah, right, yeah, but
But then that's where the evil bird shows up.
yeah,
And thank God it doesn't attack them because I'm sure,
I guess it's
you
evil.
know, could do something
Yeah.
with its beak. That was not Toucan Sam. It was a
yeah,
very, very scary bird.
yeah,
Definitely not a Disney bird.
No,
yeah.
no.
There's no doubt that it was a rough movie,
Yeah.
and uh, yeah, I think it was very meticulously made. So,
Matt,
um,
why I mean, aside from just the fact that they could do it and it gave it an interesting look and everything like that, do you think there was any particular reason why they chose to have not one or two, but like three or four very noticeable shots towards the end with the split focus?
I just think it was fashionable at the time. Honestly, I still don't like those shots, and
Some
but
are
at
better
the
than others.
yeah, Yeah, I mean, a few of them were barely noticeable, but yeah, I think that it's just something that we used to do in the '80s that we don't do all that often anymore. But
Hmm.
Yeah, and some of those
yeah,
were pretty extreme. They were almost like a split screen.
Yeah.
Like there
yeah,
was no trying to hide the split. Not like as well Spielberg does, like in Encounters of the Third Kind.
The one where
yeah,
he's in the foreground looking at the camera, and then there's like I don't think it was a bridge or something in the background that was like whatever going on, like
yeah,
across the top of the screen or something. That one I felt had a lot of purpose behind it, but it was also the most noticeable by far. And
yeah,
then I can't remember what happens. There's like one or two more, and then there's when the girl is there, and she's on the left of the screen, and we're really getting a close up of like the just like shell shock look on her face, and the fact that she's clearly been like beaten or something. And then they do a split where he's walking to the little motorcycle or something to pull the gas can off, you know. Um,
yeah,
that one frustrated me the most, just because not because it looked that bad really, or wasn't near even as noticeable as the previous one I mentioned, but that was the one I felt was the least necessary. Because if you just racked the focus, in the shot, you could have all the attention on her face and get all of that, and then we don't need to be focused on what he's doing until the very end of the shot when he pulls the gas can off. So you could just have her turn as they rack onto him, and it would have been just fine. It would have been like a really effective
yeah.
shot in conveying where our attention should be.
So this is pure speculation, just pure speculation.
Sure.
Especially because clearly the movie was shot spherical, not anamorphic. It was shot Academy frame and everything. I actually do have a particular amount of experience with Soviet lenses, and obviously Gil has a little bit of experience with Soviet lenses himself. You too. I mean, we all have experience with Soviet lenses,
Mhm.
and
Well, in that I've worked on movie sets with you and your Soviet camera. Yeah, sure.
yeah,
Okay.
right, yeah. I mean, even up to 1985, a lot of Soviet lenses had major breathing problems,
Oh,
even the spherical lenses. So,
wow.
like, you rack focus, and it can really be
A
probably
funhouse
even more
mirror experience.
right, even more distracting than having a diopter and doing a split focus
Interesting.
shot. But again, that is purely speculative. I have no evidence to back that up, but just kind of throwing it out there as a possibility that maybe they were trying to do those dramatic rack focuses and just thinking like, Jesus, lens breathes like Pavarotti. Let's not do that.
It's funny because through looking through the other movies that the actor was in,
Yeah.
the one who played Florian, he was in this other movie that actually I've been meaning to see, The Painted Bird, which was very recent actually. I don't know what role he had there, but it's supposed to be a really depressing Holocaust movie. It's about a Jewish boy that like goes through like tries to find a refuge during World War II, and he gets
Uh,
like comes across a lot of weird characters in the process. And I was like, darn it, I'm gonna have to watch this movie now. Because it's like on Hulu, and I don't know when it's gonna leave Hulu, so I should probably like watch it like soon. It's like another depressing movie. Maybe I can wait until Holocaust Day. I usually try to watch a Holocaust movie during the Holocaust Day, but I don't know if it will still be on Hulu.
no, Stellan Skarsgård is in it. Holy crap! Yeah, I need to see this too. uh,
Yeah.
it's weird that I haven't yet, but
I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that the actress who plays the other other large character, Olga Miranova, probably did not have a good time making this movie because it's the only thing she's ever done.
Yeah. Oh,
One and
my
done.
impression. Yeah, my impression is that most people who made this movie didn't exactly have a lot of fun on the set. They actually shot the entire movie in sequence
Oh wow!
over the course of 9 months. And yeah, the actor who
9
played
months.
yeah
That's
yeah, and the actor who played Floria, Alexei Kravchenko. Basically, the only makeup that they put on him at the end of the movie to make him look that old and worn out was like, some gray in his hair. But everything else was just like, yeah, that was just him. I mean,
yeah.
they really beat the shit out of. They really beat the shit out of him in order to make that movie. Yeah, and I guess if we ever do want to have a conversation about this, like we can actually raise some questions about the ethics that involved in making a great piece of art, because again, I regard this as one of the greatest films ever made. But I mean,
Did they need to kill the cow?
right. Did they need to fire live ammunition 10 centimeters above their lead actor's head?